What's up, YouTube? ODST General back again. So today, guys, I have some Star Trek New Horizons for you. Now, last time I did this this mod, it wasn't super duper well received, so we're gonna see how things look this time. And I just really want to show off the hard work these developers have been doing. Even though I don't do a lot of gameplay videos on this, I absolutely love Stellaris, and especially this mod. This is probably one of my favorite mods ever in like any game, really. And this is, in my opinion, the best Star Trek game, even as a mod. So, I want to go ahead and talk about it. They just had a big patch release yesterday, so yeah, let's go ahead and let's get into it. So the patch notes, there's a lot of stuff in the patch notes, so I'm probably going to just scroll that across the screen, maybe not, we'll see what happens. But some of the big points is they've added a bunch of new events for the early game for the various species, such as the for the Andorians, the Vulcans, humans. A bunch of new events were added. There's like crew activity events, distress calls were added. A whole bunch of different stuff was added there. But the biggest addition is the ship roster saw a big overhaul, which I'll go over that a bit more in a little bit, but that's definitely the biggest thing. They've created a interstellar union. Sorry guys, I've just been struggling to talk today, but gotta get this video done today, so here we are. Anyways, yeah, Interstellar Union has been made for the Andorian players, so it's basically kind of the similar thing to the Federation, just like an alternative version. The Xindi Council, they had a big overhaul to the way their government works. Every few years, players choose which species is the dominant one. If you're not a Star Trek fan, basically the Xindi is kind of a group of aliens, kind of sort of like the Covenant, just less religious. And they all came from the same planet originally, so they all more or less peacefully get along. There's a bunch of new ships added along with the ship classes for the Federation. Bunch of weapons were overhauled. There's a few Easter eggs hiding around. Government overhauls. They added a new version of the Saurian species. More variety to a couple of species. Bunch of new planet textures, most of which are available in the sub mod for this because of the limitations of the actual mod. They went through and they updated the Sol system with models from NASA and various probes and stuff like that with the texture, so those all saw big overhauls. So much more accurate looking representations for the most part, except for Mars is all lit up, which is still really neat looking, but otherwise pretty accurate interpretation of Mars here. Early on, there's ways to change that, which is pretty cool too. So that's all the really big stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about ship classes here. Yeah. So ship classes were overhauled, and they've added in 8 new classes of ship. Originally, if you guys have played Stellaris, you probably understand how the ship classes work, but for those of you who have not played Stellaris or who haven't seen it played, basically the game has like 6 classes of ships that fit into like standard archetypes of like destroyers, frigates, cruisers, all that stuff. Originally, Star Trek New Horizons had that same setup because the game required it. The developers for the actual Stellaris game have changed it so that on the back end, modders can say, hey, instead of having this as a specific class of ship, this is its own ship. You don't need to have it fit within one of those predefined archetypes. But the developers have basically instead created 8 of their own archetypes with individual ships. So each ship's unique in its own way, but it fits more or less within a specific archetype. So those archetypes are frigates, light cruisers, explorer ships, multi-mission vessels, heavy cruisers, advanced cruisers, exploration cruisers, heavy escorts, and then they're working on a heavy raider class. So those are all pretty cool. So let's just kind of go over what that is. Frigates, just what you expect, real light ships, light weapons, pretty quick vessels, just kind of, real cheap throwaway ships almost. Light cruisers, more close to a destroyer, so a little bit more heavy duty of a ship. You have more like point defense stuff, so good for screening fighters and smaller ships, or you can go really torpedo heavy to have them be more effective in group tactics against larger ships. So you can have a lot of them with like heavy weapons, or they can be just kind of screening for smaller ships so that your bigger ships can punch holes in the bigger targets, and they can screen out the smaller targets for you. Maybe go in, mop up some of the smaller ships while your big ships are trying to get to where they're going. You have your explorers. These are similar to the light cruisers, but they're a bit heavy dutier. Kind of long range, long serving ships is what these are supposed to be. They get a small reduction in upkeep. They get longer sensor ranges, better speed, and they get some special stuff like tractor beam snares and stuff, which some of the other ships don't have. So that's all pretty neat stuff there. What else do we have? Multi-mission vessels. So this is probably going to be one of the most commonly fielded ships for a lot of people. So your multi-mission vessels, those are like your Nebula classes, your Mirandas, stuff like that. They're basically just meant to be kind of an all-around, very flexible ship. They have a wide range of technology they can use, a lot of different weapons. So you get fighter craft, spinal mounted weapons, point defense weapons. They're very varied. Now, the cost of this, because they're so varied compared to any other ship, is that they're a little bit more expensive, but the biggest cost comes from the bonuses they get tend to be less impactful than maybe some of the other classes of ship that are a little bit more specialized. So these ships are kind of just good all-around ships, or can change depending on your needs for their various roles to fit into a fleet. But the ships themselves feel pretty good, do have their limitations compared to some of the other ships. Your advanced cruisers, they're just they're kind of big ships, they're the heavier ships. They tend to get their own special stuff, like special warp drives, things like that. They're the only ones that can use it. So let's see if I can find some of these. So that's going to be like your Crossfield class, which is the ship from Discovery. That gets its Spore drive, or the Excelsior, which can get its transwarp drive, stuff like that. What else do we have here? Exploration cruiser. Basically, this is the battleships. So these are your Enterprise D, your Ambassador class, your real big, heavy bruiser ships. Just real heavy-duty ships. Basically, they're the tanks that you're going to be fielding. They can field some fighters. They have some support stuff they can do, extra auxiliary stuff, and they just got real heavy shielding. You've got your heavy escorts, so these are pretty limited too. Right now, this is like the Defiant and the Prometheus class are your heavy escorts. They're just kind of like a little bit heavy duty, a little bit slower than maybe some of the frigates and stuff, but pack a really big punch. Attack ships essentially. They're not really good at support. You don't necessarily want to have a fleet just full of only these, because they're maybe not as strong as a Galaxy class, but these can come in and pack quite the punch. Maybe a small support fleet of these standing by somewhere to help your fleet out in certain situations, or maybe use these as a like a flanking force or something. The heavy raider, it doesn't have, I think, any ships. Actually, I think there is one. If I go back up here, the heavy patrol ship. I think this is supposed to be the heavy raider. I'm not sure if it's the same thing or not, but this is basically going to be a lighter ship than the escorts, basically still packing a really heavy punch, but even like lighter and faster, but probably even less tanky. So that's all the ships. Let's talk about some of the ships. So a lot of the ships had model overhauls and stuff. There's a lot of the same ships, but they now have like 40 ships in here. A ton of new ships were added. Probably the most of which added was the Discovery era, which I'm not a huge fan of Discovery in of itself. It's got some alright moments. The ship design is just, it doesn't feel like a natural evolution of the ships, because it's, it's a reboot show in a sense. It's not supposed to be, but they go through it, and because it's been, you know, several years since the last TV show, they've tried to reboot a bunch of the designs to modernize them and make it fit with the theme of their own show, which is kind of fine and well. But, you know, you look at like Enterprise, which did it before the original series, and there was some criticism there, but for the most part, they did a pretty good job of making their ship looks like it would have like eventually turned into the Enterprise, and there was enough time between it where it made sense. These ships, you know, they're okay, but they don't really fit, and it doesn't feel like there's enough time to make them eventually fit into like something of their, you know, similar class. So these were added in. Some of the models did have overhauls, like I think this Akula class here had a new model, or at least some new textures made. A new class is the Challenger class, so that's a pretty cool ship. Kind of a little bit of a kit bash for the Galaxy. The Bonaventure, this is another new one added to the original series era. This is based off of a model from Star Trek Online, although I don't know where the Bonaventure actually originated from. It might be a ship from the books. I know that Star Trek Online tends to pull its ships from the actual like Star Trek books and then like model them out if there's no models for, you know, their use or anything to base it off of. They just make up their own models. I think the Bonaventure is probably a case of that. It's definitely from Star Trek Online, though. Kind of an interesting ship. Nice to see them just kind of bolstering the TOS fleet a little bit more. Got another Discovery ship. The Kelvin class, this one's pretty cool. Obviously, if you've seen the 2009 movie, the USS Kelvin's the first ship you see. It's what Captain Kirk's dad is on. Chris Hemsworth's dad, or, you know, who plays him, is on this ship, and he crashes it into the Romulan ship. This one's basically an original series inspired like fan art for it. You know, probably what it should have actually looked like if it was staying a little bit more faithful to the lore, to the idea that like the universe changed and the ship design changed after the events of that happening. But kind of a cool ship. I think it stays faithful enough to the original series while still being close to the new version to pay homage to both. So I'm pretty excited to use that. The Centaur, I do believe, is a new ship. I don't think this was in previous versions. I think I felt like it was in, but I think I was just getting this confused with Star Trek Armada 3. I do believe this is actually the first time this was implemented in, as far as I'm recalling. The Curry's in previously. The Niagara is another new ship. I'm not quite a huge fan of this design. I just wish they'd get rid of that third nacelle, and I'd probably like it significantly better. But hey, can't win them all, right? Steamrunner is another new ship. A little tiny ship. I haven't had a chance to use this one yet either. I'm pretty looking forward to that too. And it's kind of cool. They've gone through and they basically have made the ships, you know, the ships that have refits and stuff are actually in there as variants now instead of being like a different class of ship or something. So that's kind of a nice way of doing it, I think. So when you first unlock the NX class, it starts off like this, and I haven't gotten to the point in my own personal campaign, but eventually I'll be able to unlock it to make it look like this, bring it in a little bit closer to the more conventional design of Starfleet ships. Got the Hoover class. Now there is one class I noticed was missing, which is the Nimitz class, which is based off of the Discovery series. I guess they probably just didn't have time to finish the ship before the release. Not really sure. I'm probably most excited for this. I've really grown to like this ship over the past year. Just been watching, like, I've watched a couple of videos where they talked about it and some of the features and design choices behind it, and it's just supposed to be like a background ship. You really don't ever get to see it, but for being a background ship, it actually just looks really good, I think. There's extra like nacelles on the top, and I think it's like a torpedo tube or another nacelle or something on the bottom there. I'm not really sure what these are supposed to be, but really cool looking ship. I actually think I like this more than the original Galaxy class. We've got the Poseidon. This is another new ship being added to the NX era. Probably my favorite ship to get added, though, is the Walker class. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Discovery. I did really like this ship design. I wish they would have gone with a little bit different tinting on the hull and some of these like secondary colors to make it look more like the original series, but it does stay fairly close to the design choices of these other ships. Obviously, there's some differences. These ships look a little bit more generic in their design, while obviously more thought and detail was put into the Walker class. I actually like this thing more than the Discovery, even though it's not quite as good of a ship. It's quite varied in its role. So you can see this is with all the technologies unlocked, so you wouldn't necessarily get all of these in the actual game, but you know, you've got electronic countermeasures that you can get, all sorts of different countermeasure systems. We've got modulating shield frequencies, so a lot of different uses for this ship. An older ship, but still a good looking one. Kira, Norway, this is a new ship. One of my favorites, this is definitely up there on my favorites too, of ships that was added. I didn't expect to see this ship added in at all. This is the Ares class. This is based off of a Star Trek fan film, which got a preview released for it, but never actually got released for the full fan film. It got sued by CBS and Paramount, or at least one of the two. I think it was CBS. Before they could go on with the film. We did get to see the ship, though, and it's pretty awesome. It's called Star Trek Axonar. If you guys want to check it out, I do highly recommend it. It's a very high-quality one. It's got actors from the TV show in it, and just it's a cool project, really cool ship. This one's supposed to be a very combat-heavy ship, quite the Hulk for its time. So, looking forward to fielding one or two of these in my fleets at least. Like I said, the Walker class, we already showed that off, but let's go ahead and look at this warp drive here. So, once again, all these technologies are unlocked. That's not necessarily going to be the case. Like, you won't have necessarily access to, like, Vulcan warp drives. But you can see here, we've got the Spore drive, your Transwarp drive, and, like, Slipstream drive, which all have, like, massive bonuses to speed and stuff. Which, compared to maybe, like, just a standard engine, doesn't seem like much, but you gotta figure this Type 9 polarized combat warp engine is probably pretty similar to the time period you're gonna see a quantum slipstream drive, I'd imagine. The warp speed's 120 versus 55%, so you know, obviously these ships are actually getting a massive bonus to speed for the time they're being fielded in. Excelsior, that's an older ship. Another ship I didn't expect to see was the Vesta class, another Star Trek Online model. This one is definitely pulled from the books. It's Dax's ship after she leaves DS9. She ends up eventually becoming a captain, and yeah, this is her ship. So pretty cool ship. I've never played with this thing in Star Trek Online, but I've seen these things in use, and they're like science vessels. There's what they're supposed to be, but they're pretty similar to like the big mainline ships like the Enterprise and stuff. Obviously, it's a pretty large ship size-wise, and it's late era, so they're powerful ships, probably not to be messed with. It's also got special weapons. It's got very heavy doomsday cannon. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's actually going to be something that gets put into the game eventually. We've got phaser lance, though, all sorts of different unique weapons. Yeah, so that's all the new ships, guys. What time are we at on the video here? Oh, 18 minutes. Yeah, you know, I think that's where I'm going to end it. I went on a little bit longer in the other video. I could show you guys gameplay, and I feel like I should, but, you know, I'd really like to actually start a game from the beginning if this is something you guys are going to be interested in. I'll kind of gauge what sort of reaction this video gets, and if it gets enough views, I'll probably just go ahead and start a gameplay video up. But either way, if you guys let me know in the comments below, if there's enough engagement with this, I might just go ahead and do it, even if there's not a lot of views. So let me know in the comments below if this is something you would want to see more of in proper gameplay format. The other thing is let me back out here. Let me go to the menu. Who would you want to see me play as? Because there's a ton of species in here. I know a lot of people have already played as the Federation. The Federation has the most ships, has the most events, and it's the most developed, but there's a ton of other species. I mean, basically every species from Star Trek's in here. A lot of them have interesting events and just unique traits and stuff, like the Borg, you have to actually like assimilate other species. The Dominion can like build people and force people into the Dominion. Some of these species are very generic, so like these fish people here, I probably wouldn't play if somebody asked me to, just because there isn't really anything special about them yet that I'm aware of. But there's definitely some out there, like, you know, the Breen. They're kind of an oddball one. If somebody asked me to play the Breen, I might just do that, or the Ferengi I've played as before. So basically, I guess as a rule of thumb, anybody who has like a unique ship set, I'd probably play as. Although, if it seems like it would be an interesting enough species, even without unique ships, I might just go ahead and play them. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. If this is something you guys want to see more of, let me know. And if, like I said, if enough people seem to react positively this time around, we'll go ahead, we'll play more of this, and if not, well, you know, no big loss, I guess, right? At any rate, guys, like I said, check out this mod. That is Star Trek New Horizon. It's available on Steam. They've got their own Discord that you can hunt down. I recommend checking that out too. Other than that, guys, thanks for checking out the video. Like, subscribe, share. I really do appreciate that, but not only is it appreciated, it helps me out on the channel a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.